What's good? It's Woog. I just wanted to weigh in on the rumor that Migos broke up or that they're breaking up, and I just wanted to add a little bit of context and some perspective as to the group and what this ultimately means. Like, when people think about like a group breaking up, it's almost like naturally associated with beef, or that there had to have been something beef-wise that happened. And the reason why a lot of people are saying that about this situation is because Quavo and Takeoff from Migos, somebody had put out a tweet or a post about them doing like a collaborative album together, just the two out of three Migos, Quavo and Takeoff, and then that Cardi B and Offset, the other member of Migos, unfollowed them on social media. But I mean, let's look at this from like a holistic standpoint. Like, do you realize how much music Migos has made as a group together? Like, think of your favorite rap group in like the history of rap. You could go as far back as Run DMC. You could go as recent as the groups that are out today. But I mean, whether you're talking, Wu-Tang Clan, Tribe Called Quest, Bone Thugs and Harmony, Outkast, The Lox, Ghetto Boys, 3-6 Mafia, Gangstar, like, have any of them recorded as much music as Migos have? Like, really think about this for a second, because it's almost like a lot of the public must have thought that Migos started around the time of Bad and Boujee. 2016 was the song's release, and it was on the 2017 Culture One album. But nah, that's just when they hit #1 on the Billboard charts and kind of took the rap game over for a moment there with Bad and Boujee and the album that it was on. But really give them some respect in terms of, one, appreciate how difficult it is to remain a group. Like, there's a reason why Tribe Called Quest only stayed together. And I'm talking about functioning together in a continuous period of time. I'm not saying like if you break up and then come back 10 years later for like a reunion album or something like that. I'm saying really appreciate how difficult it is to function as a collective unit, with fame and all the distractions and all the trappings of success and stardom, and, maybe this group member getting more shine than these group members. Anything can happen to shake up the dynamic where a group is no longer viable, or at least ideal. But Migos have been together since like 2010. Like, they had the Jerk Season and No Label mixtapes, and then they got with Quality Control, QC, that's Coach K and P, who have since worked with, Lil Yachty, Cardi B. I think she's under a management deal with QC, Lil Baby. So they've had OG Mako when he had that song, Bitch, You Guessed It. Quality Control is one of the top, management, kind of indie-ish labels that have bigger distribution types of groups that you could be a part of. But Migos had a couple of mixtapes, and then they got with QC. Then they dropped Young Rich G's, YRN. That was kind of their game-changing mixtape, and this was now like 2013. So that's 9 years ago they dropped that mixtape. And that's the one that had Versace, which then Drake had like a remix to it, and he just bodied the opening verse. But I'm sure like around that time, people thought that Migos was going to be like a novelty act, like somebody who comes out, with like one recognizable song and then disappears forever, or maybe sticks around for like a year or two. Would anybody have guessed around the time Migos did Versace that we would be talking about them in this light 9 years later with this much interest? Now, I do think that interest is kind of, dovetailed a little bit in the last couple years, just basically since, after Culture 2, basically, and all the individual Migos released their solo albums. I feel like things haven't quite been the same since, just in terms of interest in the collective that is Migos' music together. But after they got with QC, they had that YRN mixtape, which, I mean, that was a very like interesting and good mixtape. And this was, just after Future had his first couple albums. So he had Pluto and Honest, right? And I'm talking about like the early parts of trap. And I'm not talking about like the early 2000s trap where people would talk about trap music. I mean, T.I. had an album called Trap Music. I'm talking about like the sounds that you could currently identify and point to as, the origins of modern trap music. So we're talking like, Future, when he was like turning the corner from his earliest stuff, Pluto and Honest albums, to then the Beast Mode and Monster mixtapes. That's where he turned that corner, just before DS2. And, Lil Wayne has certain stylings that would lend themselves to, trap later on. Lil Wayne's tattoo game, his superstar, imagery, his, long dreadlocks, a lot of things that he was pioneering in like the early 2000s and late 90s, then carried over, into the, late 2000s and then into the modern trap era. But I look at the modern trap era as having started with, Future, who is like later descendant Dungeon Family, whose, earlier members were Goody Mob, Outkast, that was Dungeon Family, Cool Breeze, and people like that. And then you had like the Lil Jon era. Then you had like the Lex Luger era where the beats were like, it was a little bit more drill-like in terms of how the drums work. But you had Waka Flocka Flame and Lex Luger and that whole sound. Then you obviously, before you had T.I. and then Young Jeezy with T.I. being produced by DJ Toomp for a lot of his earliest stuff. But when I think, modern trap, I'm thinking like Murda Beats. I'm thinking Metro Boomin. I'm thinking probably Zaytoven. Zaytoven was definitely one of the key producers kind of transitioning into that era. So with Migos, they started coming up around 2013, the Versace song, right? So this is around the same time Young Thug has started to emerge. I think Young Thug might have broke like a year or two later with some significant mixtapes. But yeah, Migos is early trap. This is, even pre, Travis Scott really taking off. And obviously, Gucci Mane is also seen as one of the OGs of trap music. And, he had Bangladesh and, just different producers working with him as well. Lex Luger. And again, when Gucci was at his highest commercially, it was a busier beat style, busier sounds. And, even early Migos, if you listen to early Migos, their early stuff, I'm talking the Young Rich mixtape, those series of mixtapes that they had in late 2013 into 2014, the Streets on Lock. That was their 2 to 3 mixtapes with Rich the Kid. And then they had like, a QC compilation, which was like pre-Lil Yachty. So this is like 2014 called Solid Foundation. And then things really started kicking off when Migos then had the No Label 2 mixtape. So they had a No Label 1 before they were with QC. Then they had the Young Rich niggas. They had Streets on Locks, multiple Streets on Lock mixtapes with Rich the Kid. And then they had No Label 2. And that's when things started kicking into high gear. We're talking early 2014. Then they did like a collab mixtape with Gucci. Then they had the Rich Timeline, which was their next big mixtape, just as Migos. Non-compilation. This is just a Migos mixtape. Rich Timeline. This one stands up there with No Label 2 and Young Rich as like probably the best Migos mixtapes. And then in around 2015, Offset got locked up, so he was like able to participate less in some of their 2015 stuff. But even then, they had songs like Dab Daddy, and they had Look at My Dab. That was on the Back to the Bando mixtape. So they were like trend-setting by this time. This is 2015. And the way that they rolled as a group just looked like they were just one unit. Like, think like Bone Thugs when they were in their prime. Think Wu-Tang when it was all, members, locked in and in on it together. It just seemed like they were inseparable. Hell, they're family members. Quavo is Takeoff's uncle and Quavo is Offset's cousin. So these are like cousins, uncles, nephews. They're all related. So they have a close relationship. And they didn't even grow up like in the hardest of hoods. They self-admittedly were looking for drama in the streets. But the family element in Migos has always been present. And again, if you listen to the early stuff, they're yelling a lot of their deliveries. You've had, Offset go through a couple different style changes in terms of how he delivers his rhymes. I feel like he's a lot more subdued and measured in recent years. But he was almost yelling as much as the other members in the early stuff were like, like they were doing a lot of that. If you're Takeoff, and then the ad-libs, they were just making all kinds of noises, and it just sounded like it was a family affair. Like when one person's on the mic, you hear the ad-libs from other group members too. Just a really interesting dynamic that they've had on their tracks, and this goes, way back on singles like Hannah Montana or Fight Night. That's the I'ma beat the see up like Mike, and Handsome and Wealthy, which you could say is kind of a precursor to Bad and Boujee or something, But yeah, their style also kind of changed change a little bit over the years to where they started to kind of, mellow out a little bit in the delivery. Again, if you listen to certain early Migos songs, some of it's even unrecognizable by today's Migos standards. So it was only after all of that mixtape activity, and I'm talking 12 mixtapes total. I mean, they've got 50 music videos. And I think that it's because, after they dropped Bad and Boujee in 2016, released the Culture album in 2017, and then Culture 18 came right on its heels in the beginning of 2018, that right now it seems like an abrupt breakup. But they've been functioning collectively, making a ton of money together for a long time. To me, they've already beaten the odds. They've exceeded expectations in terms of not only what's expected out of a group in terms of success, because they've had huge, they're among the top greatest in terms of commercial success for a group, but also how prolific they've been. Again, I challenge you to find a group that has made more music together than Migos. Again, Migos has been at it and totally active consistently for 11 years straight. They did take a little bit of a break in 2020, but I mean, that was COVID, right? So that was just after they all released their solo albums. So everybody kind of took a step back around that time. But then they dropped, Culture 3, which didn't have the same commercial success or really appeal as Cultures 1 and 2. But yeah, Migos is a brand. And, I would be a little bit surprised if they do truly break up. But again, even if they do, they're playing with house money at this point. And the thing that's interesting about Migos is there wasn't one member that outshined the other two. For a moment, it looked like it was going to be Quavo. He was the one who was kind of vocalizing on some of the singings, on some of the hooks. You would see him featured on, some prominent other songs. But nah, then, Offset was in the high-profile relationship and marriage and family with Cardi B. And even Takeoff, I think, is low-key a lot of people's favorite member. His voice is that is the quintessential D-boy sound voice. He sounds he steals a lot of songs, verse for verse for verse. Sometimes he's the one who comes out sounding the best in a lot of these songs, whether you're talking early Migos or even more recent Migos. But yeah, I mean, hats off to the group. It is not easy to function for this long and to have this long a track record with that many songs and to have been committed to the group, to the collective, where you didn't see one member kind of big timing the others, at least not for the public to see. I feel like everybody has gotten their level of shine, and then when they come back to the table, it doesn't seem like one person is trying to outwork or outshine the other members. It still seems like it's a collective family affair. But yeah, let me know what you think about it. I just wanted to shed some light on how deep the track record is for Migos. This is far from a flash in the pan, so when we start talking legacy later on, you have to at least mention Migos in some of these conversations when you're talking about some of the best groups of all time. Even if you don't like the music from their era, not everybody's a fan of Lil Baby and the different people who are popping in this era, but you've got to respect it, and you've got to respect the longevity. My favorite groups didn't last this long. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.